Ladies and gentlemen, open banking pioneers, hello, and a big warm welcome to our campfire talking about retail. So with Black Friday and the festive season nearly upon us, we actually thought that this was the right time to talk about open banking payments in the retail sector. At OBE, we believe it's time to fundamentally change the way we make payments online, from cards to instant bank payments powered by open banking. In short, we believe that open banking payments should be ubiquitous. Now, we all know the retail sector has ever-increasing consumer demand for improved user journeys and lowering costs. So let's look at the part open banking can play with SCA, embedded finance. I personally believe that's a game changer, and securely underlined sharing data to support the adoption in this sector. But there is one elephant in the room, and that's the recent news that we've all been reading about, the Visa, Amazon credit card issue. Let's discuss that as well. So we believe in being red hot relevant. So it's right that we get the experts to talk about that. And talking of experts, we have an absolutely phenomenal panel of experts to have this debate with you. And that isn't me just saying this. I can absolutely promise you that my WhatsApp has been lighting up this morning. People saying what a great lineup it is. So thank you to all of them. I got very little work done this morning, so I've got a long evening ahead of me catching up, but great to have that feedback. Now, as you can see, we have Karina graphically recording this on the side of your screen. But you can also see there's a Slido where you can ask questions. So please be heard. We have this panel of experts. Be heard and ask them questions as we go through. And you can also see a poll, and we will be sharing the results of that poll through our social media platforms over the next couple of days. Now, as always, I've asked Gio, our head of research and blog, to source some insightful facts just to share with you, to set the scene really. Now, we've a couple of informative articles that have gone out recently on our blog, our OBE blog, from our panelists today. And over the course of the coming months, you'll be able to read more from them. So I just want to share a couple of facts that are already on the blog. So we've Brian Hanrahan from NewerPay on our panel, and in his blog, and I'm sure again today, he'll be sharing some research that says that, and let me just read this, 54% of consumers and 64% of mobile bank users would willingly pay by open banking if they were given the opportunity. So willingly pay by open banking if given the opportunity. Interestingly, 3 in 10 consumers said they would use a trusted brand. Okay, so 3 in 10, there's a bit of work to do there, I would suggest. In contrast, okay, more than 1 in 6 said a retailer would, if a retailer incentivized them, they would use open banking payments. So maybe that's the cue, yeah, or the clue even, yeah. So which is a lovely segue to share one more piece of research, and that's from Suzanne from Money Hub. And in her blog, she shares a report, and listen to this, 67% of customers are comfortable sharing their data in return for personalization. So does that fit with what Brian's research was saying? We can talk about that. So trust was a big word that comes out in all the research that you read. So we've the trusted brands, and we're the biggest and the best in open banking payments and loyalty around our campfire today. Now, there is one prediction that I do want to leave you with, and that is TrueLayer. TrueLayer predicts that open banking payments will replace debit cards as the default method of payments by 2027. That is so good. I'm going to say it again. Open banking payments will be the default payment, yeah, over credit cards and debit cards by 2027. Boy, have we got some work to do. So there is just one more shout out I would like to do, and that's a big thank you to Todd, who I know has literally the last couple of days got off a plane from San Fran. So thank you, Todd, for going the extra mile, literally, to be with us. And I am looking forward to hearing more about the online, offline use cases from Token. So without further ado, and I promise to keep my intro super short because this is such a big topic, particularly with the Amazon and Visa news. I am delighted to introduce you to Paul from Vendorcom. Now, Vendorcom is a retail payments community. At Open Banking Excellence, we believe in collaboration. So we work closely with Vendorcom, and Vendorcom drive change, and they work very hard and very, very closely with our regulators behind the scenes, particularly on SCA, which is something we will be talking about. So they have a wealth of insight to share. So who better to talk about retail sector than Paul? Paul, handing over the mic to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Helen. And it's a real privilege to be with you and with everyone that's here around the campfire and our wonderful lineup of panelists today. So two panels, and we're going to try and cover a great many questions. I'm going to be keeping an eye on Slido, so I really want to make sure that this is as interactive as possible. We have got an impossible task today to try and cover everything in the next 55 minutes. So I think we'll keep answers brief. Let's keep the questions brief and get through as many different things as possible. So let's just jump straight in to our first panel. And we're going to be particularly looking at where the opportunities and challenges lie. What are the benefits of open banking in the retail industry? And certainly from my almost 20 years in the retail payments area, or as I typically look at it, as the wider merchant payments arena. So not just pure retail, grocery, high street equivalent, and so on, but right into all of those other sectors: food and beverage, hotels, airlines, insurance, utilities. There are so many merchant market sectors that we really could be addressing here. And perhaps we do need to be looking at how we address each of those quite independently. So maybe we can get onto that in a moment. But where does the latest retail tech drive things? What can be done to remove the roadblocks taking this sector forward and paving the way for a greater consumer benefit? Now, I'm really delighted to hear that true layer prediction, partly because that we're looking pretty much at 5 years. And actually, that seems a reasonable distance away, but it also gives us quite a challenge to meet that date. But the reason I like that prediction most is that it starts to reflect a much more realistic time frame than we perhaps were hearing from the open banking world 4 or 5 years ago, when the comment really was around, well, everything will be open banking within 3 to 5 years. Well, here we are 3 to 5 years later on, and we are seeing us right at the pivot point, I believe. And I think we saw it in style yesterday when Amazon made that announcement. I believe it's one small step for Amazon, one giant leap for open banking. And I think now is the time to get behind this. And the reason I say it's a small step is that I think once you've moved or created the opportunity to move things onto debit predominantly, it's a very small step beyond that to turn things and turn payments and turn the psyche of the consumer, which is really our biggest area to try and influence here, into paying directly from their bank account. So I'm delighted to be here. I could talk about this forever, but you're here to hear from our wonderful panel. So I'm just going to very briefly ask each one of our panelists in this first panel to introduce themselves, 20, 30 seconds, and then I'm going to start pushing a few questions through. So let's start with Janine. Give us an introduction.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm Janine. I'm the Chief Exec of Innovate Finance. We're the industry body for UK FinTech, and it's our mission to support the next generation of technology-led innovators to create a more inclusive, democratic, and fair financial services sector for all.
Great. Thanks, Janine. Suzanne, lovely to see you.
Hi, thank you. Lovely to be here. Suzanne Homewood, Money Hub, Enterprise Sales Director. My background actually is, I guess, a mix of retail. So I'm telco through and through, and then also Samsung. So Samsung for 5 years in hardware. So I joined Money Hub to help them really understand this market, the retail market, the consumer market outside of financial services, and really build those use cases. So I'm so delighted to be talking on this panel with you today.
Great, thanks. And Farid?
Hi, Everyone, thank you very much for having me here. Farid Sejelmasi, Plaid. I had our partnerships. Plaid is, the largest open banking sort of player globally in the US, in Europe, and we're very excited to see how the market is developing and how we can contribute to make it open banking ubiquitous and overtaking cards hopefully before 2027.
Great, thank you. And George.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure. So my name is George Davey. I'm product director for open banking here at Klarna. I'm basically coming from a world before PC2, before there was any interfaces, any APIs available. And today with Klarna, we're helping businesses and also our consumers to actually be part of this new era of PC2, making payments and analyzing data for our consumers.
Thanks very much. Well, look, we're already 20% into the time we've got allotted to deal with this. So let's get things moving. We've heard from Amazon yesterday. I think we could potentially be at a real pivot point. I've been relatively skeptical. Let's not go quite so bold as that. Let's say relatively conservative about how the open banking world is going to penetrate into this tried and tested merchant payments ecosystem. But let's just look at some of those benefits for the merchants, because they are clearly there. I'm going to go first to Suzanne. Where do you see the immediate low-hanging fruit? Where's that coherent, compelling message that merchants need to hear?
Well, I think, gosh, as you say, it's such a large subject. There's a lot. In payments specifically, obviously the cost differential, the speed, the immediate settlement of cash, all of those elements that we know and love that payments can do. But for me, it's much, much broader than that. It's that first step on proper engagement with customers. At the moment, customers are having to search for cards, putting in card details. This gives them a step into that relationship, in-app payments. If we take a step back and think about over the last 18 months, we've changed the way we look at things. We've changed the way we work. We've changed the way we shop. And actually, we're all in a place where we're rethinking our purpose in life. And so it's a real opportunity for retail to rethink how they engage their customers. And we're going to come on to challenges in a moment as well of how you build into that. I think the real bonus for payments is it's that first step, the first step that retailers make into open banking. And payments is such a simple one to make, as I said, because there's so many benefits to them, but there's benefits to their consumer as well in how they authenticate. And again, I know we'll go on to SCA and the challenges of that and the changes and differentials. But I do think that payments has a benefit across every single aspect. And when we're going to talk about online and offline, but we should also talk about small business to large corporations and large organizations. Huge, huge benefits to small business in open banking payments to be paid directly from their customers simply via a QR code or a link, have it straight into their bank, no chasing of invoices, no following up. It's such a benefit to small businesses, but how do we bring this at scale to them? Because that's our big challenge, education. How do we bring it at scale? How do we make it work?
Great, you've covered a lot of ground there. So let's let me go to George now and see where Klarna is playing in terms of getting that really clear message across to the merchant.
I think Suzanne has been pretty much said a lot of things about this, been pretty right about it. So obviously cost will be a driver. If we look at the overall cost reduction that is possible using open banking over, let's say, traditional methods such as credit cards or wallets, I mean, just the processing fees will make such a difference, but also facts around the risk of payment arrears, chargebacks, and also the fraud that comes along with credit cards. We will see a very much cost-driven market here as well. But it's not only the cost, but also what I do see is the competition in the market actually. We will see much bigger competition and it will be less locked by the traditional payment players. So I think we all need to watch out some way for a big leap of innovation, given the market players out there, the possibility now today with the open banking to create really beautiful user journeys and alternative ways of making payments, and but also manage the customer's financial, you name it, be it a buy now, pay later product, be it slice it, or be it bank-to-bank payments directly. Right? I mean, we will see so many more opportunities out there in the market created by our market participants.
That's a really, really good set of points there. Now, Farid, you were saying that you're driving things through quickly. You'd like to accelerate the timeline. So clearly, you must be conveying some really clear messages to the merchants if you're going to get that buy-in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think Joseph and Susan hit the nail on the head. Cost, shortening cash life cycles, but also bringing more safety into the system. I think all of this will translate into lower cost for retail, for merchants, but potentially even for end users, for consumers, which is also a great news there. I think open banking has come already a long way. I think if you look what's happened just this year, we've seen, I think now we're trending around like 2.5 to 3 million transactions a month. So there is already, we're seeing like the start like of this like hockey puck trend, and the adoption is there, and we're seeing a lot of merchants, specific some use cases, higher value items that are more prone to fraud, items where margins are smaller. We're already seeing some adoption from merchants, and this is very, very, very exciting. There's obviously a long way to go, which is even more exciting. And I think the primary one is to get consumers to know and trust open banking. And this will come by bringing this offering to them, by having retailers they trust offering them open banking, by obviously trying open banking, but also by creating this coalition in the ecosystem between TPPs, banks, merchants, talking positively about open banking and bringing those benefits to the consumer. There are some technical aspects that need to be improved. There are improvements in terms of UX, latency in some cases. There are some projects in flight, like VRP, delegated SCA. I think the combination of all of this, and also the massive investment that are going into open banking, will probably accelerate the adoption in the next 2 to 3 years.
Well, thank you for that. And I think you make a really strong point, Farid, about merchant deployment of this great technology and consumer adoption. And for a long time, I've really been highlighting that real debate. I can see all the arguments for the merchant. I see slightly less of the really compelling argument for the consumer, and certainly COVID for certain merchant market sectors like airlines and travel and hospitality and so on, really ran into a roadblock in terms of the potential adoption of open banking this time last year or a little bit earlier. But I'm just keen to then expand our questions out to these roadblocks. Are those misgivings that I might have had in the past, are they really being addressed? And can we bring a compelling message to overcome those roadmaps? So let's be as honest as we possibly can about the pushbacks that we're getting from the various stakeholders and buyers within the market, and then knock those challenges down with some really, really strong arguments. So, George, I'll come to you first on that one.
Happy to take this one. So I think most of the people know Klarna probably from the buy now, pay later proposition, less known probably as being a market leader in the open banking space and PC2. I mean, right now over 6,000 banks across the EU and UK, been over 15 years in the business, so we have quite some experience in terms of the technology. And this is also where we see a big gap today from what we actually expected from the PC2 and open banking. So we have really strong promises, I must admit, in markets such as the UK, the Netherlands, or Finland, for example. But there is still APIs that are not working to the extent that we need them to work to also create our customer products actually out in the market. So I think also what is missing here, besides the technology aspects, is the proper communication and the education of the customers. What is open banking doing, and what does it do for our customers? Yet today, I mean, 2 years into PC2 in open banking, we're seeing campaigns driven by the banks to avoid any sharing of credentials and being super cautious when it comes to allowing third parties accessing their banking information, right? I mean, we need to build an environment of transparency, but also an environment of trust. And this cannot only happen by the market participants. Also, the banks will have to play their part in that role. So educating the customer when and why it is okay to share data or to initiate payments from your bank account is one key factor here to address those.
And I'm going to bring Janine in here because, Janine, you are bringing together all of the different stakeholders. So if what George is saying is right, we've got to be creating this trust-based infrastructure between the banks, the payment processors, everybody in the chain to get these messages through.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Paul. And I would actually echo both George's point and Suzanne's point, and actually Farid's point, in terms of the argument that we not only need, we not only need the providers, we need the large institutions, we need the FinTechs pulling together, but we also need to have the government, the regulators, all playing a key role in terms of educating the end consumers. And particularly, we need to hear more from the innovators, and we need to listen more to the FinTech voice if we're going to push this ahead. I mean, one point of interest as well, because Paul, you mentioned in terms of the outcome and the impact for the end consumer, I actually think there's a massive benefit for the end consumer, whether it's regards to the fact that they now suddenly have the benefit of choice, but also the personalization piece. I mean, there's a real opportunity here, but we have to all pull together in one direction to make sure that we realize that as well going forward.
Yeah, that's such a strong point. And I hope there are regulators on this call because I've for many years said that regulators, more than any other group, can drive the pace and the direction of change and the adoption of new innovation and new technology. Faster than standards, faster than market demand, even faster than technological change. When the regulator says jump, we do tend to jump. And so I hope that they will catalyze some of the arguments and some of the moves forward in this area. Suzanne, what are you seeing and hearing in terms of roadblocks?
I think the education piece is really important, and I think Janine, your point on the FinTechs is important too, because what I think we can't be seen to be doing is running after really short-term use cases and value adds and putting in POCs in little tiny corners of the business that don't really make fundamental change. What we need to do is find real strategic benefit that, as you say, it impacts the customer journey, but drives whether it's cost savings or it's revenue growth. Ultimately, open banking is about consented decisions by the consumer to share data. If we help the retailer find a way to fix that problem, to bring that into their loyalty packages, I think they can really then escalate upwards and onwards. And that's the feedback I've been getting. There's been trials in small areas and tactical areas, but it hasn't integrated into the full platform, doesn't integrate with their existing data. So it isn't really telling them what they need to know and hasn't really driven the thought process of building into loyalty. Interestingly enough, the last sort of 3-4 months have really driven this payment interest, where that's kind of risen to the fore. Again, I think we need to be really careful that we're not saying it's that or this, it's this and this, giving the customer choice. And there are lots of great technology out there that brings open banking integration technology with all their existing payment platforms, so that they can use that kind of solution alongside all the other payment gateways. But I think if we can get the retailer to understand a longer term strategy that payments maybe is the first step in to a much bigger customer journey that brings in loyalty and ultimately helps their customers shop better. The point of open banking is we help the UK community, the global communities understand their finances better. Who is else better placed than a retailer where the customer trusts the retailer? I mean, we're talking about trust. There was a report recently that only 43% of UK population trust their banks with their sharing their financial data. So actually there's a large proportion out there who are waiting for somebody else to trust to share their data with. And I think retailers have got that great opportunity.
That's a very, very strong point. One of the things that I see from a merchant perspective, and I think that I hope there are a lot of merchants on this call. Merchants are relatively conservative. They're investing for the medium to long term. They're not just jumping on, as you say, Suzanne, on proof of concepts. They will try a little bit of that, but they're not going to bet their investment, particularly given the current economic landscape. And I think from my experience, they're looking for a really clear business case. They're looking for a really clear route map or transition plan from where they are today to where we would like them to be or where they should be tomorrow. But crucially, they want a very clear confidence that what they're investing in will be around for not just tomorrow, but the day after and the day after that as well. So anything that feels that it's a little bit of the moment, a bit trendy, really doesn't get the full impact. And I think maybe as an industry, we need to be a little bit more cautious about positioning the world of open banking as something that's really big and new and shiny, when actually what the merchant community wants is something that's really robust and resilient and internationally interoperable and all of the good things that they've learned from the cards world. So yeah, real challenge there. And I really like that long-term strategy piece. Now, I just want to talk, I'm really conscious we've probably only got about 5 minutes left here. I'm keen that we talk about the areas of the merchant world that we might be able to implement this, because clearly there seems to be pretty low-hanging fruit in the e-commerce world. Maybe less so in the face-to-face arena, but again, I'm keen to put that out in terms of your experience, and I'll jump to Farid on this one. Where in the merchant community, whether it's in which channel or which merchant market sector, do you think we could perhaps most usefully be targeting our efforts to overcome the roadblocks?
Thank you, Paul. Great question. Open banking is a digital first product. So I think the obvious choice first is to go after merchants that are completely online. Although we all have products that can serve merchants in sort of the point of sale with QR codes, and actually showing in some cases, in some markets, actually working really well. But let me focus on the online space. So there are different variables. You will look at merchants who have high value of goods, merchants who suffer from high return rates, merchants who potentially, because they transact internationally cross-border, higher fraud rates or higher non-acceptance rate by cards. So there are very specific segments where we see our merchants coming to us and looking at open banking as a way to solve some of these problems. And the interesting part, when they're bringing open banking online, it's not to replace cards, but to offer open banking alongside cards and give the choice to consumers to use whichever solution is working for them. What we see in many cases, very quickly, we can get to adoption levels that are in the double digits after a few quarters of use, because there's specific segments of consumers who have interacted already with open banking, who are digitally native. They will use app-to-app redirect, which is sort of the best experience in open banking. So clearly, we target merchants, and within the merchant, there are specific type of consumers who will naturally tend to use open banking. But yeah.
Great, thank you. Now, again, really conscious of time and just keen to pick up, Suzanne, on your point around the use of data. Again, I see the debate sometimes between merchants and banks in terms of who owns the customer, who owns the customer data. And the merchants will go, well, we've got the best loyalty plans on the planet. It's our data, it's our customer. And the bank will say, well, it's our cardholder, it's our. How do we resolve that and create a much more collaborative environment for the both main parties, protagonists, the banks and the merchants, to gain most out of this? Suzanne, first with you, and then I'll come to the others.
I think it's a case of making sure it's actually customers' data, isn't it? I think if we can get to a point where, again, open finance into open data is the point that it's everything about our data that we share for the right reasons, and we're encouraging people to work together, companies and organizations to work together to deliver those services. If you take a real loyalty app, it should be helping me shop in the right place at the right time for what I want, encouraging me to spend where I need to spend based on my habits, and then helping me save or put money to where I need to put money because I understand what I'm spending my money on. That's where open finance and open data should really be focusing. And that's working together, not working in isolation, trying to hold on to the customer.
Great, thanks. Now, again, we're running out of time, and I'm just going to jump to George, because I know, George, you've probably got a couple of points that perhaps be worth jumping in here with.
Yeah, thanks. Very nice question. So yes, I think putting the payment functionality to the side and think about the data that we're retrieving from the banks. So the financial data, I mean, this is giving us such a very nice and also up-to-date insight and a fair insight into the customer's financial situation. So we have a fair, concrete, and up-to-date credit assessment. We don't have no impact on credit score or multiple lookups. So we can really make use of the data, not only to enhance the consumer's financial well-being, but also to tailor suit our payment options to make sure we have the right option at hand for the customer at the right time. So I think it's all about the data and the financial well-being of our consumers that we now have the opportunity to make use of with this data at hand.
Great. Well, look, I knew this was an impossible task. We're just out of time on this particular one. There are some questions coming in on Slido, and I would encourage you to keep the questions coming. I'm going to try and weave some of those into our next panel. I love these sessions because they are just a little teaser to open the debate. Please do reach out, everybody that's sitting around the campfire here tonight, reach out to George, to Suzanne, to Farid, to Janine on LinkedIn and through other channels, because they can answer your queries and questions. I'll try and help as well. But thank you, guys. We've just touched and just scratched the surface, and perhaps we can come back to you towards the end of the session if we've got some more general questions after we wrap up our next panel. But for now, thank you for running through that, and I'm going to, without any further ado, just jump straight in to our follow-on panel. We'll be covering similar things, but particularly looking at how do we actually go about introducing open banking into the checkout, making it reliable, giving merchants a really clear, pragmatic route map. And again, to pick up the points that were made earlier, how should this be seen as part of being a long-term strategy, as part of a total payment acceptance approach? Because that's frankly what the consumer wants. And I think broadly, it's what the merchant wants as well. So our panel, Todd, Brian, and Claire. Todd, introduce yourself, and then I'll move to Brian and then Claire.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. My name is Todd Clyde. I'm the CEO of Token. Token is an open banking payments platform, and really our mission is to drive this shift that we're talking about today, the shift from the use of cards and the use of wallets to the use of account-to-account payments. So we do that. We basically provide infrastructure for connectivity to banks. We provide infrastructure for payments. And we're the plumbing that's under the covers of many of the open banking payments you're using today in the UK and across Western Europe.
Great, thanks. Brian?
Hi everyone, I'm Brian Hanrahan with the NuaPay part of EML Payments. And so we're a global payments business with a suite of open banking enhanced products for merchants, fintechs, and payment service providers.
Right. And Claire, good to see you.
Hi, nice to meet you all. So I'm Claire Pearce and I work for EPAM. I'm the Global Payments and Open Banking Director for them. So essentially we, very similar to what Token do, we provide infrastructure and technology solutions to many of our clients who include banks, FinTechs, startups, every potential sector that you could possibly imagine in the merchant sector for online e-com as well, global e-com. Nice to be here.
Great, thank you, and it's great to have you all on the panel. Now, one of the points that was made very early on in our last panel session was that open banking gives the merchant a really good way of engaging with their consumer. So it gives them a way of embedding the payment process into their own flows and owning it. It also gives them a way of engaging with that consumer across all of the different channels that they've got, whether face-to-face or e-commerce or contact center or whatever it happens to be. So I'm keen to understand from each of you where you really see the opportunities for open banking payments as an embedded payment method. Is it too much of a technological leap for most merchants, or is there something that's really ready for them to plug in alongside what they're doing right now? Claire, I'll start with you and then I'll go back down the line.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Paul. Good question. We've already seen some of this actually, and we've actually built and we've helped some of our clients design these solutions. So if we look at Ideal in the Netherlands, predominantly, that's a bank-to-bank account transfer facility that we offer. Pay Direct, also in Germany, we've assisted with that proposition as well in terms of a move away from traditional card payments and offering alternatives to consumers essentially to be able to transact. We've got so many use cases, we would be literally here all night, but there's a lot we need to consider, and some of these have been mentioned in the previous panel. So we talked about alternative payment methods. I'd come from a firm that we had just over 1,500 APMs attached. So, used to seeing that global e-com vision of other ways to pay. I guess the point here is linking that back into open banking. How do we bring that proposition in for consumer choice? So to be able to have other ways to pay other than the traditional card transaction, which I find is really interesting, and there's lots to offer.
Great, thank you. Brian, what are you finding in terms of this embedded payment approach?
Yeah, so look, I think we've seen over the last kind of couple of years that open banking payments have kind of grown up, and they had some pretty serious gaps that merchants couldn't really tolerate before. So, issues with the basic technology, but more importantly, things that people expect in a payment method, like the ability to do refunds, the ability to reconcile, to move the actual money underneath it, and like I think the I suppose players in this space have done a lot of good work now to kind of join the API aggregation piece with the actual underlying money movement and make this into a payment method that works for merchants, because merchants don't want to have to piece together all the Lego blocks themselves. They want a payment method that is comparable to the alternatives they use today, and they want all the benefits but not all the hassle. And I think the other thing that's interesting that's happening is we move from a world where people came directly to FinTechs to get open banking payments, to one where now the distribution channels are stepping up their game. So most or many of the major PSPs and acquirers have now kind of partnered with with an open banking player to have this product in their portfolio, and that's kind of where merchants want to get it. They just want to tick a box and it appears on the menu rather than have to build a dedicated integration outside their gateway. So I think they're the big things that we've seen progress.
That's a really strong point. We've got to meet the merchant where they are today. There's no point in us standing over here on FinTech Island waving and saying, look at how cool it looks over here, and all the fireworks are going off and it looks really cool. And merchants who are just sitting there feeling glum in their legacy world going, well, how do I get over to FinTech Island? Now, Todd, you're working with some of our VendorCom members who are those traditional payment channel providers. Tell me a little bit about some of that journey to help those legacy players offer open banking into the merchant world.
Well, I completely agree with Brian that this is going to be massively adopted, not because it's going to be easy to integrate by merchants. It's going to be made available by gateways and PSPs and acquirers. So yes, that's who Token works with. So the reason they're incentivized to do this is there is a risk of them becoming disintermediated if they don't provide this. Their merchants are asking for it, but it really gives them an opportunity to generate a new revenue stream as well, and really puts them at that checkout button to be able to offer new services right there. And then as far as the way that we've worked with them to integrate it, we really help our partners deploy in one of three ways. So the best is if this could be preloaded in the gateways. And we've got a number of partners that just make this available to their merchants as by default. Second way is we encourage them to deploy into marketplaces. So the Magentos, the PrestaShops, the other sorts of e-commerce gateways that are accessed by merchants. There are still a few merchants that do control their payments pages, that do have the technical resources in-house. And for them, we provide a white label merchant portal to be offered through our partners for the merchant to onboard themselves to the sandbox, to the REST API, to the documentation, et cetera. So those are the three ways that we work with our partners to deploy this as a solution. Obviously, the making it available as a default on the gateway is the absolute best way to have greatest reach out from the start.
Great, thank you. Now we're seeing just so many different acquirers, payment processors, gateways. They all sort of occupy their own little niche. How does the open banking world engage with these different players? Because it's difficult to get out fully to the merchant world, but actually it's pretty challenging getting airtime with payment gateways who are so focused right now and getting their act together on things like SCA. How do you get airtime, development time with them to make some of those happen? I don't know whether, Claire, you're experiencing any of that right now.
We are on a global scale, Paul, as well. So it's, we focus a little bit about UK and Europe here, but we have this, it's not really a problem, it's an opportunity for us as a technology provider globally. And we see different models depending on the type of business or the type of merchant or the acquirer, or whether they're a bank or an FI. It does go across quite a range. And what we saw, obviously, from a Black Friday, just on Black Friday, we're coming up to this, so this is a big piece as well. But equally on, with China Singles Day, it's huge in terms of the merchant processing ability. 139 billion was processed by Alibaba and JD.com alone last week. So how do we support merchants of that size, but equally, how do we support a TPP who wants to connect, a third-party processor who wants to connect into open banking? And we do have such a varying range within that as well. So it may be that we have an orchestration layer across the top, something that Brian's just mentioned earlier on, or we have a TPP, or we have a partner that potentially we could work with on each of those as well. So there isn't a one size fits all, I think, on the answer there, because actually we vary different clients and different solutions that we offer, and the different tech, obviously APIs Brian's mentioned. We have API solutions. We're working to standards on Bilingru. We have APIs on the PSD2 side. We're working on CDR in Australia at the moment with the FinTech guys there. We're also working with STET as well on some of these standards. So it depends on the solution for the client, I think, is that a woolly answer, but there you go.
No, it's a fairly comprehensive answer. That's the way I would characterize that. Brian, what are you seeing in terms of just trying to engage with this plethora of acquirers, process gateways, and others that will help create that channel for you?
Yeah, I'd say it's far less of a challenge now than it used to be, right? So I think we signed our first major acquirer back in 2018 at the end of it, one of the big global ones. And look, these days, acquirers and PSPs respond to their customers. So if they see merchant demand, if they see consumer adoption, if they see big players like HMRC and others, move towards open banking payments, then they kind of feel like they're going to miss out, and that's kind of sometimes the call you get, right? Like, I just lost a big merchant because I didn't have open banking payments in the RFP response. Now I need to get my act together, and that's kind of that's been the trend over the last few months. So I think it's less of a problem now. In fairness, acquirers and payment service providers, know their stuff, right? So they know what a payment method needs to look like for it to work. Like they can't handle reconciliation problems, they can't handle unreliability. So they now are a bit more discerning about, who they partner with. And I think in fairness, the products are much stronger than they used to be. So people are willing to get on board.
So as I usually do, I'm going to throw a cheeky question in here, and I'll be happy if you want to duck it, but maybe it is worth trying to tackle. When you're dealing with the different players, and particularly I think of the acquirers, is it easier to work with the independent acquirers, or is it easier to work with those acquirers who are scheme owned or still have their activities locked into a big existing bank? So I think obviously of the likes of Barclays, Barclaycard, and one or two others where you've still got that really, really tightly, or at least on the surface, it looks like it's a pretty tightly integrated world. Obviously, those acquirers have got real incentive in channeling bank-based payments through to their parent entity. Fancy answering that one?
Yeah.
Go for it, Brian.
Yeah. So Todd and I'll fight for the mic on this one, I think. Yeah, look, so there are advantages to being a bank or having a bank in your corner when you're doing open banking payments, right? Because in the end, these are account to account payments. The banks have really good economies of scale. They, like I would say as well, that like there was a time when card-centric acquiring businesses were a little bit reluctant to get into open banking because it was a cannibalization concern. Again, I've just come back to the whole end customer need. When they start losing merchants because they don't have it, then, well, it's better to cannibalize yourself than be cannibalized, right? So, I think that's kind of where it ends up in our experience so far. But Todd, I'm sure you can.
Sure, I'll jump in there as well.
Yeah, jump in.
Yeah, and Paul, going back to your last question as well, which is how do we engage with the channel? And I think Brian and Claire would agree with this, that it's make it easy for the acquirer and the gateway, with a purpose-built technology. So what I'm clearly seeing is a bifurcation in the market between those that provide account-to-account propositions to merchants versus those that provide infrastructure for the existing acquirers and gateways. It's a very different platform. How you handle refunds and reconciliation is very different. So yeah, we built a platform that makes it really easy for a channel player to launch a whole new proposition rather than accept a new form of payment. And then regarding our experience working with existing acquirers. So yes, we work with a couple of very large banks. So one has launched an open payments in the UK. They had divested their acquiring. They view this really compatible with their cash management business. So, it's compatible with offering accounts and liquidity solutions. And now they get to offer a payment mechanism that settles faster and solves a liquidity issue as well. Another one is a really large French bank who we partnered with their acquiring arm, and they have launched an individual account-to-account brand as part of that. So the way that they've done it is they've actually made it different so that it could also be standalone from their acquiring solution and be sold and distributed through other marketplaces. So we found it easy to work with banks and existing acquirers to launch this to market, and we're not beholden to their legacy business.
Great, thank you. Claire, did you want to come in on any experiences you've had in working with the banks?
Yes, I've worked with, thank you, Paul. And actually, I'm probably on the other side of this because I've worked at one of those acquirers. So I've seen kind of all the sides of the acquiring model and the APM model and the gateway model actually all combined into one company that I've worked for. And they aren't very different depending on each of those areas that you need to focus. We talked about reconciliation, cash management and liquidity I used to manage for them. So I know from a treasury position how hard that is as well between different settlement times and different T plus whatever times. And that's actually a really good benefit for the merchants. If you think about the account to account piece and the bank transfer coming in, actually merchants can get settled much quicker than the traditional T+3 or whatever they're lucky to be set up on from an acquiring perspective as well. So I think, there's a definite agree across the integration piece. And the other piece we haven't really touched on here is across the POS bit and the PED devices. So what could we do on that side and actually link that into open banking? So, you're in a store, you've got a beautiful jacket you want to buy, and actually, can I pay that by my bank transfer at the POS device? So, and we have seen this start to happen, but I think there's just much more opportunity there to use from an open banking perspective as well going forward.
I'm really keen to explore that because in my introduction to this particular session, I used the words total payment acceptance, and I think merchants really, I don't like to speak for them, but I spend a lot of time around them, and they frankly detest this cash is dead or cards are dead or whatever message. And as we heard in our earlier panel, it is about the existing plus the new alternatives. It's about choice and competition, and they look at things from a total payment acceptance perspective, and they want us to be able to be supported, perhaps broadly, by a one-stop shop that can say, yeah, we can provide, frankly, even if it's cash management and cards and bank-based payments. So I'm really keen to understand, and again, Claire, perhaps with you first of all, trying to open out that face-to-face in-store opportunity, because you're right, particularly when I look at the high-end fashion, some of the high ATV, there's a lot of opportunities there, but then you're opening up an even bigger question in terms of, as we heard earlier, open banking is a digital first approach. So how do you weave in the POS provider, potentially the legacy payment terminal provider? Because in many sectors, this is very diverse. The people that provide the tills in a grocery retailer are different to that provide them in the food and beverage industry, are different than provide them in whatever. It's a very divergent world. So again, you've got more people to weave into this collaborative community. Any thoughts? Any experiences?
Yeah, we have some experience with this. So we've have a really good use case where we just launched an omni-channel experience exactly like that, Paul. So where we looked at across the business, we looked at their operating model, we looked at what the opportunity was, we looked at the integration side. So this orchestration layer I talked about earlier, we did a whole level above that on a payment orchestration platform. And that was exactly that. So where they had POS, how do we interweave the POS element into there? And how do we bring it online? Because actually they had a presence, a global retailer, they've got a presence everywhere in terms of different places around the world, different stores, online e-com as well. The presence was huge. So we've been able to develop that for them. But yeah, that's from a technology front. So we're really thinking about the tech side, and coming from that area, from an infrastructure piece, but looking at the whole piece around the consult. So the consult part we do the build, we do the design, and we actually look at that for the merchant and the retailer involved. So we've got a few really good use cases of luxury house fashion designers and things that we've done some work on that for. But the wider question there is, how do we bring in some of the other PED device providers? So the big ones, I won't name them, but we know who they are. So how do we bring them into the piece? And actually, we're also working with one of them really closely at the moment on a separate piece of work. So interesting times, yeah.
Certainly is. Well, it sounds pretty one-stop shop to me. Todd, what are you seeing in terms of potential in some of these other channels, particularly face-to-face?
Yeah, so we are live through that partner in France that I mentioned in over 100 stores in France. So think about you're buying a sofa or you're configuring a kitchen. So it's a more involved purchase experience. But right there at the till, we take it from a physical to digital experience, or we take it from offline to online. So I'm going through the checkout, and then we either do a QR code or a pay by link, and then I push a bank payment directly there in store. So we're finding in that type of purchase experience, it's working very well. I do agree with you. Early adopters for this in general are certainly high ATVs, and in store it lends itself to that as well. Our overall average transaction value right now is about 483 euros. So it's certainly trending towards the higher end.
And Brian, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'd echo a lot of what Claire and Todd said there. I think we do think it's primarily open banking is a mobile native or mobile centric kind of payment method. That's where it's getting the most traction. In the physical world, we see some use cases where you've got bring your own device or kind of omni-channel scenarios. So for example, we've got a deployment with a restaurant ordering app. So you go into a restaurant or a pub, due to COVID, people aren't handing out menus, you order on your phone, and it's a QR code based system. So we do see some of that, but I think it's it's a kind of a peripheral part of the market in our eyes.
Thank you. Well, look, we're into our last couple of minutes here, and it would be remiss of me not to swear and use the SCA word in this session. And I've, as we're getting close to the end, I guess our answers are going to have to be pretty brief. I'll keep my question brief as well. I was chatting to folks many folks across continental Europe this last week, and they're saying to me that SCA is really creating a huge problem with very high levels of decline in card payments. Now, I've said for several years now that the trauma and the detriment of SCA and poorly defined legislation is created an open goalmouth for open banking. But I don't believe that the open banking world has moved into that goal, into that even starting to line up with a penalty spot to take advantage of it. I think it's going to be even more crucial in the UK, which is so heavily card dependent. So what can we learn to fast track open banking into the UK merchant payments market before this SCA sprint between January and March next year, which is almost inevitably going to cause trauma in the e-commerce market? Todd, first you, and then I'll go to Claire, and then finally with Brian.
Well, also commenting on what was said on the earlier session, which is how do you get this massively adopted, which is what you're asking there. And yes, SCA is going to create huge friction on the card and give incentives. But I don't think the answer is consumer education. I think the answer is let's give the consumers a gateway drug. And the gateway drug for open banking payments is topping up your wallet, which is one of the #1 use cases in the UK. And we all have 6 wallets on our phone. They all need to load funds. This is the best way of doing so. Also paying off a credit card. 1 in 4 credit cards in the UK could be paid off with an open banking transfer right now. So that is the TFL moment, as TFL was for contactless. That is the gateway drug for open banking payments. Let's get the users using that. And that's what's going to bridge and get them hooked for using open banking payments in the retail environment.
Great. Now, that was me thinking I was getting Helen worried when I was talking about potentially swearing, and now Todd's peddling gateway drugs in the payments industry. Claire, you next on this one briefly, and then Brian, as we're almost out of time.
We're almost there, aren't we, Paul? So yeah, we've actually developed a PSD2 compliant link as well from SEPA Payments for one of our banks in Europe, which enables TPPs to kind of link into this. So we have a sandbox, we have an ISO 20022 development portal as well to help. And we're seeing this really, drive at the moment from an SCA perspective. Some of the work we're getting from merchants, from banks, from FIs is around how do we get this in and how do we get it in for the deadline as well. And we've got lots of opportunity there, kind of waiting in the wings as well, because we know it's approaching very, very quickly, this deadline as well. So we're starting to see the fruition for that. Yes, we have that experience and we've built some of these sandboxes already with the billing group standards. So we can definitely help people get there. I guess it's the timing really of how quickly that can be adopted.
Great. Brian, final seconds to you.
Yeah, so we think SCA kind of really hitting the kind of card experience is a boost or a benefit for open banking payments. I think merchants are all about conversion. That's kind of absolutely a top priority, and anything that can help them with that, and it's going to be adopted. The thing we love about actually the data for the last couple of years has been that increasingly we see that once a consumer tries open banking payments, up to 90-95% of them continue to repeat that behavior in subsequent transactions. And so it's a perfect gateway drug situation, like Todd would say.
Back on it.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Todd. I've learned a lot. What 59 minutes this has been so far. So let me hand back to Helen to wrap things up. Thanks.
Wow, Paul, exceptional. Thank you. Todd, I actually think the gateway drug will catch on. Okay. I think we'll coin that. Okay. That was exceptional. We have had loads of questions on Slido. We will actually answer those and answer them online. We said at the top it was a challenge, particularly with that Amazon moment as well. So we will be sharing all the content online with our OBE pioneers around the world. And to your question, Paul, do regulators, and I'm going to add in policymakers around the world, tune in? Yes. And we know this feeds into their policy thinking, not necessarily the policy making, but their policy thinking. So I think that's what every pioneer wants to hear. So we will be sharing this online, and I would encourage everybody to share it again. And to your swearing, Paul, about SCA, what we will be doing in the new year to get us all match fit for 2022, we are actually going to do something engaging around SCA, see if we can make it a little bit more energetic, and maybe that's where the clue is. But all that remains, so we do finish at the top of the hour, is for me to thank all of our panelists. They have done an absolutely sterling job of sharing their knowledge. Thank you very much. Would love you all to come back again and have this debate further on next year. And I think we might change the format as well and have maybe an Oxford debate. I think that would be really good, Paul, as this sector grows and grows. And I, on a personal note, would like to thank the OBE team, particularly Nikki, who we've had a few holidays at OBE and honeymoons. She has handled all of the campfire logistics single-handedly. So hats off to you, Nikki, and enjoy that gin and tonic tonight. So all that remains to me is to say thank you for our community around the world for watching and tuning in. Take care and the very, very best of health. Thank you.